Andrew, I'm super excited to talk to you today about lessons you learned in the military and specifically how they translate into civilian life, because there are a lot of veterans who have made or are making that transition. I want to talk about some of the pragmatic, courageous decisions, and pragmatic courage is maybe the word that's coming up to me. Not like every decision is massive and big, but in retrospect, as you told me before, it may appear much bigger, right? In a moment, it's just the best next thing to do. It's courageous. So we're going to have a great conversation around that. Why don't you tee us up a little bit with why you decided to enter the military, the fun that you had in the military, and some of the lessons you learned. And let's then start transitioning this into civilian lessons, because people in these VUCA environments, maybe you can define VUCA for us, right? Or these high uncertainty environments, you can help. I think a lot of people take a lot of wisdom from your experience.
Sure. Yeah. Well, I think everyone has their own reasons for serving. I had always, since I was a kid, I think my father was a colonel in the Air Force. He did not encourage us, any of us, to serve, though. He didn't discourage, but he certainly didn't encourage us either. And all of us did, my brother, my sister, and I. So it kind of came to our own decision on that. But so my grandfather took me to a West Point football game when I think I was about 10.
Okay.
And, there was just something exciting about it. And so I had actually applied to it and got an appointment to West Point, but decided not to go, and went to university and ended up enrolling in ROTC to get my commission that way. And again, I think as a young man, if I think about just my life experiences, I always was trying to do something difficult, like push myself. So in my decision to go into the military, I chose a combat arms. I chose infantry. I wanted to do something that was difficult. I wanted to do something that was going to push myself. And I think it's really important for us. It was important to me as a young man to keep seeing how much I could do and see how far I could push myself. And so that, from what you take out of the military, I think, you and I have talked about this, there's not everyone in the military is special forces. Not everybody in the military is a Navy SEAL. So it's a microcosm of society, right? So it is a mini society. So there are people who work in finance. There are people who are cooks and drivers and mechanics. But there are some universal attributes that you learn and hopefully carry on with you beyond that experience. And so I've talked to a lot of veterans about this, and there's some. So one of them is being able to understand that there is an opportunity in every situation, no matter how dire it might seem.
Yeah.
Being able to keep your head in those situations. And gathering information, identifying what is the opportunity here. That skill itself or that experience itself is invaluable in all aspects of your life. The other thing is scarcity. That's kind of one of the jokes that I think all veterans have is, if you've ever served, you've definitely dealt with scarcity of sleep, scarcity of food. Even if you're an accountant, you're probably dealing with some antiquated software that you're using.
Right. Yeah.
So again, it's being able to be resourceful about that. So there's this, the ability to deal with scarcity, resourcefulness, and also resilience. And this aspect of, or this feeling of being part of a team.
Yeah.
That was the thing that I think about this all the time, that when you're part of a highly functioning team, an infantry platoon or a company or a scout platoon, things like that, everyone there is an expert at what they do. And it's not like I'll watch your back, you watch mine. It's I'll watch my back for you and you watch your back for me. It's like you can rely on people to do their job and do it well.
I've heard that. Yeah.
Yeah. And so I've seen that in my own businesses where every company I've had has been very diverse. And it's not because we had some mandate to create a diverse workforce. We just went out there and found people who shared our values and were great and competent what they did. And it just happened naturally.
And they brought different viewpoints, right? And it brought different viewpoints. Absolutely. I've heard that that's so many things to ask you about. First of all, I don't know if consciously or unconsciously or looking back, if you're still in the military, at least the early phases was some sort of rite of passage, because you talked about wanting to stretch yourself and grow and be challenged and pushed. It sounds like it's an amazing human experience and growth and development and leadership. And the second one is, I hear for a lot of veterans, when they leave the military, one of the hardest things is missing that esprit de corps. It's very hard to recreate that type of trust and esprit de corps. Am I onto something here? Is this resonating?
No, that absolutely. But you can find it. And again, I think you have to find the right company, the right culture. Culture is everything. But no, that is something that you miss. The other thing is being able to translate what you did in the military into what you do in the civilian world. Yeah. I have actually a close friend of mine who retired as a full colonel. I was talking to him after he got out. It was 2 years later, and he's like, "I used to manage, thousands of people. I've got 5 now." And so in the civilian world, not understanding that you've got some people who are incredibly capable.
Yeah.
And it's not just sitting in a foxhole. And so I think that's one of the things. But you talk about the esprit de corps. It's incumbent upon us as business leaders to develop the right culture, and bringing in people, identifying quickly, this person may be really good at what they do, but if they're disruptive to the culture, they need to go.
Right.
And that, I know that's not a new concept, but I've witnessed it. I've made the mistake in the past. And again, it's just not worth it.
It's when you described resourcefulness and scarcity and teamwork and so forth. It sounds like you in the military, you get some entrepreneurial qualities that might transfer to life outside of the armed forces. Is that correct?
I think that's true. I think, depending on what your role was in the military, I think that those skill sets translate very well into the startup world, into the entrepreneurial world, because you're not daunted by challenges.
Right.
You talked about rite of passage. I think a lot of those things, a lot of things that drove me as a young man, and even probably still today, are insecurities. Right? Am I good enough? Can I do this? Well, if somebody else can do it, can I? So I think that's a driver of success. Is a lot of that is at some level some insecurities that we want to conquer.
Sure.
But no, if you think about a startup, and when I first got out of the military, I worked for some Fortune 500 companies before starting my first business, and I love no knock on Fortune 500. I think it's a great place to learn, be trained, be part of teams and so forth. But I would take a guy or a woman who's come out of the military, who's had increasing levels of responsibility. I would take them on a startup or into an entrepreneurial environment any day.
Okay.
Any day. Again, you don't have to necessarily tell them what to do. You just say, hey, here's the problem we're trying to solve. Let's work together and get it done. And the resourcefulness that you learn, especially I've done some work with some special forces nonprofits who are placing, these young men who are coming out into the private sector. Phenomenal skill sets.
Yeah. One of our other guests, Roger Hollander, spent time in the IDF, Israeli Defense Forces, and he said one of the greatest gifts was you can work with anybody, because you work with every strata of society. By the time you come out, you can find commonality fast with somebody and just get on with it, which I think is a huge skill set. I know you've also parlayed some of that. You started some of your own companies. You're also doing some work with MIT and their business school, right, around entrepreneurship and so forth. So it sounds like you continue to build on what you learned there, either consciously or again, unconsciously, I'm not sure. But it seems like you continue to refine some of those skills and create opportunity for yourself and others.
I think you have to. The rate of change is increasing all the time, and if you don't keep up with it, then it's very easy to find yourself on the wrong end of success.
Right.
So that certainly is a driver. And I've also found being around people who are either in a learning environment or a collaborative environment outside of your own organization, it always leads to questions you didn't think about. I remember a few years ago, I was giving a talk at a university, and someone asked me a question, and I looked at her and I said, nobody's ever asked me that, and I've never really thought about that. And I thought, well, this is great. I'm getting more out of this than she is.
Yeah, right. Yeah. And having the courage to do that. What are some things in the military? Every organization has some plus and minuses, right? What are some things in the military that you have to shed when you go into the civilian world? What are maybe some of the things that don't serve you particularly well that you might have picked up in the armed forces?
That's an interesting question. I think so. Any job you have in the military, it's you get it done. You get it done on time. You get it done when it has to be done. And I'm not going to say all costs, but almost all costs. I think that you have to be more empathetic, I believe, into different. You're going to have different people of different skill sets and different levels. So. And different ability to commit.
Yeah.
So for instance, every organization I've had people who will work 24/7. They're just people who just won't turn it off. Like they're just always on.
Yeah.
And that's that. You get a lot of that in the military. So but here's one of my rules. I'm not missing a soccer game for my kids. I'm not missing a play for my kids.
Yeah.
So being able to say, look, there's certain times where you have to force people to shut things off, but also making sure that your team knows that, we may be friends at work, you may be part of this highly functioning team at work, but there's another aspect of your life that will continue on beyond our relationship that you need to tend to. And that's friends, family, and so forth. Yeah. So being able to making sure that you're allowing for that in the private sector is very important. Whereas, in the military, you sign up for a reason and it really is a 24/7 commitment. So I think that's one of the things that's an adjustment that you need to make. I don't think that's that difficult for people though, once they get out.
Yeah.
I have one of my, a close friend of mine who got out of the military a few years ago was saying that he remembers waking up one weekend saying, I just felt really weird. It's like, it's the first time I wasn't in pain in like weeks. So
I love this. It's the small things that catch you off guard. Yeah. Jocko Willink, he talks a lot about the Navy SEAL, very, very recognized warrior. He talks about how in SEAL Team 6 or whatnot, it was always like, everything is good. Everything you approach is good.
Yeah, nobody. Yeah, no one cares.
No hassle. Good.
Yeah, everything's good. there's no excuses.
You're always looking for the opportunity, right? You're always like, well, now we can train more. Well, now we can fix this. It's an interesting, resilient mindset.
It's true, and the other thing is, it's raining on everybody. Like, so nobody wants to hear you complain about the rain.
Right.
So that's the other thing is, excuses, complaints, and so forth. They don't go well because we're all going through it together. So that's that kind of mentality where we're just driving on, we're driving forward. That's something that will stay with you in your business career as well. And, I don't want to overstate my military service. I certainly wasn't a Jocko Willink and many, I always feel a little self-conscious when someone says, thank you for your service. I like, well, it was an honor on my end. But certainly there are many people who've done a lot more and are more courageous. And they're also, by the way, family members, spouses, and so forth, who don't get the credit that they deserve for being there. Because when you're in the field or deployed and so forth, you feel like you're in control of that situation. The people you left behind, they're not in control of that at all. And there's a silent. My mother had me while my father was in Vietnam. And she had two babies, she had my brother and my sister, both of them in diapers when she had me. And so I look at her, she should have gotten, medals.
No, I get it. It's a team effort. It's the unsung heroes. I totally get that. Let's end with this because I'd love your take on the rate of change. You brought it up. It is happening. I don't know if control is a particularly effective mechanism anymore. There's too many moving variables now. I'm not sure how much you can rely on control as much as maybe corporations have been used to. Let's just talk about, give me some tips and tricks for our leaders out there about, hey, it's a highly uncertain environment, lots of shocks, lots of changes. How do you thrive in an environment like this?
Excellent question. And I think that's why I like to, I'd like to keep one foot in that kind of academic environment, one foot in the kind of community environment, and also in business. Is you have to be a continuous learner.
Yeah.
But I also think you have a healthy respect of history and a healthy respect of what's worked in the past. Not to be a slave to that, but understand, okay, how different is this really? It's interesting. If you think about the advent of the internet and online marketing, the first early years of that, everyone was like, oh my God, this is a black box. It's so mysterious. Well, actually it's direct to consumer marketing, which has been going on a long time. And a lot of the variables and factors that contributed for years into successful direct marketing were applicable.
Yeah.
But the medium was different. Timeframes were much more compressed in terms of when a test starts, when you can read a result, how you can roll things out. So again, that goes to rate of change, right? So things changed quickly, but there's a lot of learnings that people took from their previous experience that were applicable. So I think you have to be, also have to be humble. One of the things that when I don't understand something, I always think to myself, well, they must know something I don't. And so maybe, be a listener, understand, ask a lot of questions, and just you have to be humble. I think the best leaders that I have been served under, worked with are incredibly humble people. They are voracious readers. They have a very strong connection to people and understand where their people are, and know when to push and when not to push. But if you think about, when I think about rate of change in today's environment, it just reinforces the fact that you have to be a continuous learner. You have to get outside of your own organization, your own culture, and see what else is going on. Talk to people who are maybe in a similar situation, because it's easy to feel like you're alone. You're alone on an island, but you're not. You never are.
Yeah.
And also, I think this actually, MIT taught me this. There are some universal problems that every single industry thinks is unique to their own.
Right.
But they're not.
Yeah.
So when somebody who's in healthcare, you talk to, being in IT, I talk to somebody in healthcare and they're, oh, here's the problem we have. And I'm like, oh, well, did you know that, the fashion industry may have solved this 20 years ago? It just hasn't gotten to you yet.
Yeah.
So I think that's really important is understanding, getting out of your own comfort zone, your own industry, and asking those questions and sharing those problems to understand how other groups have solved for those things. And also, you're never too old for a mentor.
Yeah, right. Continues, yeah.
Yeah.